Me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
Okay, so this happened in 2009, and I had either just graduated high school or I was about to. And my boyfriend was living with us at the time, and we were in our bedroom, and my mother and her boyfriend at the time would get into very loud, like angry fights. So when that would happen, we would usually leave the house when it would start getting uncomfortable. So this particular night, they were screaming at each other, and we left out the back door. So the way that our house is set up, when you walk into the front door, you're in the living room, and there's a hallway that to the left is the bedrooms, and to the right is the bathroom and the kitchen where the back door is. So while they were fighting, we snuck through the hallway and went out the back door. And we were gone for a good 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And when we walked through the door, they were staring at us like eyes wide, and they looked scared, and we're like, what's going on? Like, we had left before and come back, and it was never a big deal. And they asked us, well, how long have you been gone for? We said, I don't know, like 45 minutes, an hour maybe. And they looked even more shocked. So come to find out, they said that a few minutes before, about 15 minutes, we had apparently walked through the front door. We're giving them dirty looks. They were assuming because they were being too loud with their fight. And we looked angry, walked to the hallway into our bedroom, and slammed the door shut. And this still gives me goosebumps to this day because we were like, what the actual, what is going on? So we walked to the hallway and looked, and the bedroom door that we had left open when we left was completely shut. So I was scared, and my boyfriend at the time, of course, was scared too, but he decided to open the door. And as soon as he opened the door, it was obvious that the window was wide open, which we never left the window open. And the room was really cold. And mind you, like I said, it was around graduation time, so I remember it was really hot outside. And the AC didn't really reach my bedroom, so it was usually a little bit warm, but this night it was ice cold. And I was so freaked out that I didn't want to sleep in that bedroom that night. So we ended up sleeping in the living room. And it still freaks me out to this day because I have other stories. I grew up in New Mexico. There's a lot of, witchcraft stories I have, and, S. Walker encounters, things like that. And this was the first time I had heard about, any type of doppelganger situation. But either way, super scary to this day.
Okay, so the story I'm about to tell is why I will never touch a Ouija board. When I was in elementary school, I went to a friend's sleepover party for her birthday. It was me, her, a few of our mutual friends, and a few of her friends who I didn't know personally. The house that my friend lived in was kind of old, dark, a little bit far out from the city, but not completely isolated, but still kind of creepy. So this was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So while we're having this sleepover, we're playing all of those games that we used to play back then. So we played Light as a Feather, we played Bloody Mary, and we just sat around telling ghost stories in the dark. All of that was fine. Nothing out of the ordinary happened while we were doing that. So after we get done with those games, I hear one of her friends talking to some of the other girls, and she's asking them like, oh, should I do it? Do you want to see it? Should we try it? And it turns out that she brought a Ouija board, and she was trying to see if anybody else wanted to try it out with her. So for context, while I was growing up, had some paranormal experiences, or at the very least experiences that I can't explain. And so for me, I prefer to just stay away from anything like that. I didn't like to engage. So the fact that all of my friends were trying to, mess around with the Ouija board was making me really uncomfortable. So they placed the Ouija board on the floor, and then everyone who was going to play sat down in a circle around the Ouija board. Everyone participated except for myself and one other girl. So since I wasn't participating, I sat down on an armchair that was right in front of where they were sitting on the floor. And then the other girl, who was also not participating, she sat on an armchair off to my left. And her armchair had its back to my friend's a sliding glass door that led out to her deck. All of the lights were off in the room that we were playing in. Pretty much all the lights, in that entire floor were off. The only thing that was on was the TV, and the TV was on just in the background on mute, and everything else again was just pitch black dark. So the girls who were playing start asking it questions, like silly stuff, like, oh, who am I gonna marry? Am I gonna be rich? Stuff like that. So everything was going fine, and then all of a sudden, one of the girls slams her hand down on the board and says in this kind of, I don't know, strange voice. It was still her voice, but the tone was a little off. She slams her hand down and she says, you guys are doing it wrong. You're supposed to say hello first. Don't be rude. And so everyone looks at her like, wow, what a weirdo. But they went ahead and listened to her anyway. So they started over, they said hello, and then they started asking new questions. At this point, they're asking these questions. The planchette is moving. They start arguing over who's actually moving it and, whatever. While this is happening, all of a sudden, the hairs on my arms and the back of my neck start pricking. And I look up at where the TV is. Next to the TV, off to the right, was a hallway. The hallway was dark because, again, all the lights are off. The hallway is dark, but the entrance to the hallway is right next to the TV. And so what I see there is a silhouette, a pitch black, dark silhouette of what appears to be a person. And I was so freaked out, but I couldn't look away. I was staring at it, and I thought maybe that's just her dad. And so I'm looking for any sign that this figure that I'm looking at is her dad. But the problem is that her dad had kind of long, scraggly hair that was like, it would show off over here. So he also had a fairly thick beard. So if that was her dad, I still would have been able to see from the shadow silhouette his hair and his beard. This figure had nothing. It was an outline and nothing else. I also couldn't feel, I don't know if any of you have experienced this. If you have, please let me know, because this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. I didn't get that feeling of recognition that you get when you're looking at another human. Even if you don't know the person, you at least intuitively know that you're looking at a human being. I did not get that from this figure that I was looking at. So while I'm staring at this thing, and I don't even know how long I was staring at it, the same girl who slammed her hand down, all of a sudden, projectile vomits all over the board. And obviously, as soon as she does it, everyone who is sitting around the board screams and scatters away from the board. Everyone's staring at her, including me. That broke my concentration. So I'm staring at her, and she kept her head down, looking at the board after she vomited. And she says in this, like, almost whisper tone, oh, it freaks me out. I said, don't be rude. So at that point, I hear the bedroom door to where my friend's dad was sleeping open. I hear him walking down the hall, and I see him coming from where the figure was standing. And when I watched him do that, I knew for a fact that was not her dad that I saw standing there. And I know that because, again, like I said earlier, you would be able to see his hair, you'd be able to see his beard as part of his shadow. So needless to say, I did not sleep a wink that night. I don't think anyone else did either. I never went back to her house, and I 100% will never touch a Ouija board.
So just as a disclaimer, I am going to be talking about mimic spirits, and if you don't know what those are spirits that poses people that you know in order to interact with you and have a better chance at interacting with you, and they are usually not nice. And I don't know if this was a mimic or what exactly this was, but the intervals for the story happened from October 2023 to January 2020, or October 2022 to January 2023. So to set the scene, I am at my boyfriend's parents' house. I am coming home for a weekend from college, and they had just gotten this huge wood wick candle, and they really wanted me to listen to it, so they lit it, because if you've never heard a wood wick candle, they crackle instead of like don't make any noise, and they sound pretty cool. So I'm typing my paper at their dining room table or their kitchen table, and I'm really honing in on listening to this candle. My boyfriend is like not there, and my boyfriend's parents have their backs facing to me watching TV. I'm listening, when suddenly I hear my boyfriend's voice, like, "Hey, Lane," come from behind me. So I turn around and I'm looking, and these people are pretty religious, and you wouldn't expect anything to happen in their house. So I thought it was my boyfriend. So I got up, I went into the dining room with the lights off, and I'm looking around for him, and I can't find him. And I'm calling out to him, walking around this house, calling out to him, no response. I text him, and I'm like, "Where are you?" He comes downstairs and he's like, "I was in my room, like, what's going on?" And I think my face was a little freaked out because at that point I had turned my back towards his parents so that if something were to happen, I was close enough to them where they would see it too. And I'm like, "I heard your voice, like, why are you fucking with me?" He told me essentially that he had been in his room for the last hour and it wasn't him, and he promises me that it wasn't him. So at this point, his parents were like, "Everything okay? Like, what's going on?" And I was like, "I heard Andrew's voice, but Andrew wasn't there. Like, I've never experienced something like that." And they're like, "It's fine. Like, you know, whatever." It not essentially happens, but they were just like, "Just leave it." And that's what I did. I just left it. And anyone who knows me in real life knows that my scariest stories come from me trying to be rational, because they're like, I usually freak out and I'm like, "That's a ghost," instead of saying like, "Oh, it's science." But when it's the opposite way and I'm like, "Oh, it was science," it's usually a spirit. And I left it alone, and it never happened again. And it's important to note that my boyfriend's parents didn't have a dog at that time, and in January of 2023 they got a dog. His name is Oakley. He's a Wheaton. He's very cute. And one night I took my boyfriend out to eat, and we were away, and when we got back the following morning, so we were out all night, my boyfriend's dad pulls me aside and he's like, "I heard it too." And I was like, "What did you hear?" Because it had been months at that point and I had no idea what he was talking about. He goes, "Andrew's voice. I heard Andrew's voice." And my blood ran cold. I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes on and proceeds to tell me that last night he heard Andrew open the garage door and go into the bathroom right next to the garage door and say like, "Hey, I'm home." He responds back to it, and he knows he's not crazy because the dog got up, Oakley, and he walked towards the garage door. And when Oakley wasn't coming back, he got up and went to go see what it was about. Then the bathroom door was open and nobody was there. He checks Andrew's room, he's not there. So I have a couple questions, like, what the hell was that? Like, what is that? And there's another story that his sister had about this thing, like 2 or 3 months later. And it happens in 2 to 3 month intervals. We haven't heard it since 2023. And it is by far one of the scariest things that ever happened to me, because why does it sound like my boyfriend? And I posted about this story a long time ago, and people were like, "You're not supposed to respond." How the hell was I supposed to know that that was a spirit? How the hell was I supposed to know that?